a quiet night, a desperate mother, a corrupt police force willing to do anything to maintain control. When Angela Carter, a black single mom, is wrongfully arrested and her son kidnapped by ruthless officers with too much power, it ignites a war they never expected. But Angela has a brother, Michael Carter, the most feared Delta Force commander, who's been off the grid for years. And now, he's back. What unfolds next is a relentless showdown between one man's unstoppable fury and an empire built on corruption. They thought they could silence her. They thought they could break her. But they have no idea who they've provoked. You think you know where this is heading? Think again. Stay tuned, because the twists will leave you breathless. Tell us what time you're watching and where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We can't wait to hear your thoughts. Angela Carter had always been cautious. As a single mother working long shifts at Dallas Memorial Hospital, she knew her son Jackson was her world, her anchor, and her reason for pushing through the exhaustion of 12-hour shifts. The neighborhood they lived in, Redwood Heights, was one of the few decent areas they could afford. It was on the outskirts of affluence, where sprawling mansions began to dot the landscape, but still close enough to the struggling communities where Angela had grown up. Redwood Heights was safe enough, but not entirely welcoming. To some of her neighbors, she was just another black woman trying to punch above her weight. It was late, far later than Angela ever wanted to be out. A double shift had stretched her patience and strength to their limits, and she could feel her eyes burning from lack of sleep as she drove her old sedan through the winding roads that cut between the luxury homes. Jackson sat beside her, earbuds stuffed in his ears, tapping away on his tablet. She stole a glance at him, his face illuminated by the screen's pale glow. He looked tired, but there was resilience in his eyes, the kind Angela was both proud of and worried about. "Almost home, baby," she said, her voice gravelly with fatigue. "Aha," Jackson mumbled, not looking up. Angela knew she needed gas before they made it home. The needle on the dashboard had been inching dangerously close to empty for the last few miles, and the nearest gas station wasn't one she enjoyed stopping at. It was one of those run-down spots just outside Redwood Heights, where the owner never bothered to fix the broken neon signs or clean the dirty windows. But tonight, there was no choice. Angela pulled in, her headlights slicing through the thick darkness as she eased the car to a halt beside the pump. The station was practically deserted, a lone truck parked haphazardly near the entrance with its driver nowhere in sight. She stepped out into the cool night air, clutching her jacket against the chill, and swiped her card at the pump. "Stay in the car, Jackson. Keep the doors locked." "Okay, Mom," Jackson replied absently, his focus still glued to his tablet. The pump was slow, groaning with age as it dispensed the gas in agonizing trickles. Angela's mind wandered to the laundry, waiting at home, the unfinished school forms, and the mounting bills. She was so lost in her thoughts that she almost didn't notice the police cruiser pulling into the lot. The flashing lights weren't on, but the car itself was an unmistakable presence, an emblem of authority that, in her experience, rarely meant safety. Two officers stepped out, their silhouettes cutting harsh lines against the dim station lights. Angela's chest tightened. She knew better than to make assumptions, but the hair on her neck prickled with instinctual dread. "Evening, ma'am," one of them called out as they approached. "Everything all right here?" Angela forced herself to relax. "Just getting gas, officer. We're heading home." The man who spoke was burly, his build more suited to football than policing. His name tag read Deputy Carl Peterson, and his eyes lingered on Angela just a little too long, the way some men's eyes did when they thought their badge gave them the right. The other officer, a younger man with sandy hair and a nervous expression, stood slightly behind. His badge read Deputy Jacob Reed. "That your car?" Peterson asked, nodding toward the old sedan. "Yes, sir. It's mine," Angela replied, keeping her voice steady. The tension was already building in her chest. "Mind if I see your ID?" Peterson continued, his tone too casual to be genuine. Angela hesitated but reached for her wallet. "Sure. Can I ask why?" "Routine check. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Peterson said, his gaze unwavering. Angela handed him her driver's license, her fingers trembling slightly. Peterson scrutinized the card, then looked over her car, his eyes narrowing as if he were searching for something to be wrong. Angela could feel Jackson's eyes on her through the window, his face half hidden by the glow of his tablet. She could sense his fear, the way children sense danger before adults could admit it was real. "Mind if we take a look inside the car?" Peterson asked, the pretense of politeness dropping from his voice. "What for?" Angela's voice hardened, her nerves fraying. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am," Peterson ordered, his hand moving to rest on his holstered gun. Angela's breath hitched. The younger officer, Reed, shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between Peterson and Angela. "Is there a problem here?" Angela asked, her own voice trembling now. "There will be if you don't cooperate," Peterson snapped. Angela glanced back at the car, her eyes meeting Jackson's wide, frightened gaze. She couldn't leave him alone, couldn't allow these men to turn what should have been a simple stop for gas into something far more sinister. "I'm not stepping away from my son," Angela said, her words coming out firmer than she felt. Peterson's eyes glinted with something cruel. "If you're not hiding anything, you've got nothing to worry about." Before Angela could respond, Peterson yanked the door open and grabbed her arm. The pain shot through her shoulder as he twisted it, forcing her to stumble away from the car. Angela cried out, her voice breaking the stillness of the night. Jackson screamed from inside the vehicle, his hands slapping against the glass in panic. "Mom! Mom!" Jackson yelled, his voice cracking with terror. "Shut that kid up!" Peterson barked to Reed, who looked horrified but frozen. Angela struggled against Peterson's grip, but his hold was unyielding. Her breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed her up against the hood of her own car, her face pressing into the cold metal. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to cry. Not in front of Jackson. Not in front of them. Just cooperate, and this will go a lot smoother, Peterson sneered, his breath hot against her ear. "I'm not a criminal," Angela shouted, her voice muffled against the hood. Peterson's grip only tightened. "You are tonight." Angela's heart thundered in her chest. She could hear Jackson sobbing, his voice choked and desperate. Her mind raced, torn between the need to protect her son and the paralyzing fear that she had no power here. What Angela didn't know was that this was only the beginning of her nightmare, and the only person who could end it was a man she hadn't spoken to in years. A man whose name alone could make the toughest soldiers tremble, Michael Carter, her brother. Angela had always heard horror stories about police brutality, stories passed around in whispers by neighbors, shared in posts online by grieving families, and broadcasted on the nightly news. But she never expected to find herself the subject of one. It was surreal, a nightmare unfolding with every agonizing second she spent trapped in the grip of Deputy Carl Peterson. He shoved her into the back of the cruiser with a force that sent pain shooting up her spine. Angela cried out, but her plea was swallowed by the slamming of the door. Peterson climbed into the driver's seat, his fingers drumming a harsh rhythm against the steering wheel. Deputy Reed climbed in on the passenger side, his face pale and eyes unfocused. Angela caught a glimpse of him turning his head, as if unable to look her in the eye. "Sir, one don't think we need to," Reed started, his voice low and trembling. "Shut up, Reed," Peterson snapped, his gaze locked on the road ahead as the engine roared to life. "You're here to do a job. Now, do it." Angela's breathing was shallow and rapid, her wrists throbbing where Peterson had clamped the cuffs on too tight. She twisted her hands, testing the restraints, but they refused to budge. Through the smudged glass of the window, she could see Jackson, his terrified face pressed against the sedan's window. The sight of his sobbing face nearly broke her. "Please," she whispered, her voice thick with desperation. "Please, let me make sure my son is okay. He's just a kid. He doesn't understand what's happening." Peterson didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, He picked up his radio and spoke into it with cold precision. "This is Peterson. We've got a potential suspect in custody, heading back to the station." "Suspect?" Angela croaked. "Suspect of what? What are you even accusing me of?" Peterson smirked at her through the rearview mirror. "Suspicious activity. Resisting arrest. Assaulting an officer. If you keep mouthing off." Angela's mind spun. What had she done? Pumping gas in the middle of the night after a long shift hardly seemed like grounds for arrest. But it wasn't about what she'd done, was it? It was about power. The sick, twisted enjoyment Peterson got from exerting control over her. They left her car behind, Jackson stranded in the dark parking lot. Angela twisted her body, straining to catch a glimpse of him through the window. She saw him running toward the cruiser, his small hands pounding against the side of the car. "Mom! Mom!" Jackson's cries pierced her heart like a knife. "Damn it, Peterson!" Reed snapped, his voice cracking under the pressure. "You can't just leave the kid like that." "Watch me," Peterson growled. "Letting her brat run wild isn't my problem. We should at least call someone. Child Protective Services. Or Reed, I swear to God, if you don't shut your mouth and do your damn job, I'll write you up myself. You want to spend the rest of your career pushing paper? Keep questioning me." Reed's shoulders slumped, his eyes locked on his own hands as if they were foreign objects. Angela could see the battle raging inside him, but his cowardice was winning. Whatever sense of decency he might have had was buried under layers of fear and compliance. They drove for what felt like an eternity, the world outside the cruiser reduced to blurry streaks of darkness and streetlights. Angela's thoughts were a tangled mess of fear, anger, and desperation. Every minute that passed was another minute. Jackson was left alone and unprotected. By the time they pulled up to the precinct, Angela's wrists were swollen and red. Peterson dragged her out of the cruiser, his grip bruising as he hauled her inside. The fluorescent lights of the station burned her eyes, and the stench of sweat and old coffee clung to the air. "Booking room," Peterson barked at a clerk who barely glanced up from his desk. "We've got ourselves a troublemaker." Angela stumbled as Peterson shoved her forward, her legs numb and unsteady. Reed trailed behind them, his silence now absolute. Angela wanted to scream at him, to demand that he find Jackson and make sure her son was safe. But the words stuck in her throat, like shards of glass. They threw her into a holding cell, the metal door slamming shut with a finality that made her knees buckle. Angela collapsed onto the cold bench, her breath hitching as tears threatened to spill over. She couldn't lose control. Not now. Not while Jackson was still out there, alone. Peterson and Reed left her there, their footsteps fading into the distance. Angela's pulse raced as she struggled to steady herself. She forced her eyes to adjust to the dim light of the cell, her senses sharpening despite the panic clawing at her mind. The cell was filthy. Scratches marred the walls, and the stench of urine clung to the air like a miasma. Angela's stomach churned, but her disgust was eclipsed by her fury. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate cruelty. After what felt like hours, Peterson returned, holding her phone in his hand. He waved it tauntingly, a smug grin etched across his face. "You want your one phone call?" he sneered. "Better make it count." Angela reached for the phone, her hands trembling. Peterson yanked it back just before her fingers touched it. "Oh, and by the way, we found some interesting stuff in your car," Peterson said, his grin widening. "A little baggie of white powder. Care to explain that?" Angela's eyes widened. "What? That's impossible." "I don't." Peterson cut her off with a chuckle. "It's amazing what you can find when you look hard enough. Guess you're not just some innocent mom after all." "That's a lie," Angela shouted, her voice cracking. "You planted that!" "Whatever you say," Peterson replied, tossing her phone into the cell. "Call whoever you want. Won't make a damn difference." Angela snatched up the phone, her fingers shaking so violently she almost dropped it. She had no idea how much time had passed. No idea if Jackson was safe or wandering lost and terrified. She had only one choice, one name she could call, One person who might have a chance of making this right, Michael. She dialed his number, the digits coming to her like a prayer. It rang once, twice, then clicked. His voice, rough and steady, came through the line. "Angela?" Tears spilled over, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Michael, the first need you. They took Jackson. Where are you?" His tone was icy, controlled. The kind of voice he only used when something terrible had already happened. Redwood Heights, the station. I'm coming. The line went dead. Angela stared at the phone, her heart pounding. She knew her brother would come. What she didn't know was the fury he would unleash when he arrived. Michael Carter had been living off-grid for years. After the last of his classified missions ended in blood and betrayal, he'd retreated to a cabin deep in the Colorado wilderness. It was a place where the only sounds were the whisper of pine needles in the wind and the distant howl of wolves on cold, moonlit nights. Isolation was his solace, a barrier between him and the ghosts of the men he'd killed and the brothers he'd lost. His phone hardly ever rang. It was a device he kept more out of habit than need, a lifeline to the world he'd abandoned. When it did ring, the sound cut through the silence like a gunshot. Michael's eyes snapped open, the grip on his knife reflexively tightening. He'd been dozing by the fire, his senses always half aware of the dangers that lurked beyond the cabin walls. "Angela?" he answered, his voice gruff, still thick with sleep. The sobs on the other end of the line jolted him awake like an electric shock. Angela was strong, unbreakable in her determination to protect her son. Whatever had happened, it was bad. "Michael, the first need you. They took Jackson. Where are you?" His voice was ice, sharp and controlled. It was the tone he reserved for emergencies, the one he'd developed over years of leading men into the kind of darkness most never returned from. "Redwood Heights. The station. I'm coming." He hung up before she could say anything else. Angela was in trouble, and so was her son. That was all he needed to know. Michael rose to his feet, his movements swift and precise. His hands worked mechanically, packing his gear with the efficiency of a man who had been trained to be ready for war at a moment's notice. In under 10 minutes, he was out the door and in his truck, the engine rumbling to life with a growl that shattered the quiet night. The drive from Colorado to Texas was a long one. It should have been impossible to make in less than 15 hours. Michael made it in 10. He left speed limits and traffic laws in the dust. His singular focus narrowed down to the desperate urgency of his sister's voice. With every mile, his mind raced through scenarios, possibilities, and the precise methods he would use to tear apart anyone who dared to harm his family. By the time he hit the outskirts of Dallas, the first hint of dawn was beginning to creep across the sky. The city's glow loomed on the horizon, sprawling and unforgiving. But Michael's world had narrowed to a single point, Redwood Heights Police Station. He pulled his truck into an abandoned parking lot several blocks away. Getting too close to the station itself would be a mistake. If things were as bad as Angela's voice had made him believe, then the people he was about to deal with wouldn't hesitate to add him to their list of victims. He needed intel. He needed eyes and ears on the ground. Michael reached for his phone and dialed the one man he knew would answer, no matter the time or distance. "Carlos Navarro," came the familiar voice, gruff and laden with the accent of a man born and raised on the rough streets of East LA. "It's Michael. I need your help." A pause. Then, a low chuckle. "Shit, brother. It's been what? 2 years? 3? Last I heard you were playing mountain man, growing a beard and hunting elk." "Cut the jokes, Carlos. My sister's in trouble. So's her kid." The seriousness in Michael's voice cut through any lingering humor. Carlos had known Michael for over a decade. They'd fought together in the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan. When you trusted a man with your life, bonds like that didn't break. "Tell me what you need," Carlos said. "All business now. I need intel on Redwood Heights Police Department. Fast. And I need you to break into their systems. Records, files, anything they're trying to hide, especially anything about Angela Carter and her son Jackson." Carlos let out a low whistle. "You know this kind of thing doesn't come cheap. And it sure as hell ain't legal. Just do it. I'll owe you." You already owe me, Carlos shot back, but the line was already humming with the sound of him tapping away at a keyboard. All right, give me a few minutes. I'll see what I can dig up. Michael leaned back against the hood of his truck, his eyes sweeping over the sleeping city. His fingers drummed against the metal, his patience unraveling with each passing second. It didn't matter how far he'd run from his old life. Violence, rage, and precision were still his tools, sharpened to a lethal edge. Got something, Carlos said, his voice crackling through the speaker. Your sister was picked up by 2 officers. Names are Carl Peterson and Jacob Reed. Peterson's got a nasty reputation, multiple complaints for excessive force, but nothing ever sticks. The other guy's clean, but green. New recruit, I'd bet. What's the official charge? Suspicion of drug trafficking, Carlos snorted. Bullshit, right? They found a bag of coke in her car. Or rather, they planted one. Classic setup. Michael's fists clenched. And her kid? No sign of him being brought in. Looks like Peterson didn't even bother filing a report about the kid being left alone. My guess? He's still out there somewhere. Scared shitless and alone. Michael's jaw tightened, his knuckles white. I need everything you can find on Peterson. Where he lives, where he hangs out, every dirty secret he's tried to hide. Copy that. Give me an hour. Make it half. Carlos chuckled again, but there was no warmth in it. All right, man. I'll see what I can do. Michael hung up and stared at the precinct in the distance. His mind was already assembling a plan, each piece fitting together with the precision of a military operation. Angela was being held somewhere inside that building, trapped and isolated. Whatever charges they'd slapped on her were nothing more than excuses to cover up the abuse of power. But Michael was no stranger to abuse of power. He'd seen it in warlords, in crooked officials, in men who used fear as a weapon, and he'd spent his life tearing them down. As the sun crept higher into the sky, Michael's resolve only hardened. They had taken his sister, threatened his nephew, and for that, they would suffer. Michael didn't waste time. By the moment Carlos called him back with the files he needed, Michael had already cased the station twice, mapping out every point of entry, every weak spot, and every shift change. Years of training had ingrained these habits deep within him. Never approach a target without preparation. And right now, Redwood Heights Police Station was his target. Carlos's voice crackled over the line, thick with urgency. All right, brother, I've got the layout of the station and Peterson's personnel file. And let me tell you, this guy's a real piece of work. He's been protected by some higher-ups for a while now. Complaints from citizens, brutality allegations, even a couple of suspicious deaths on his record. But nothing ever sticks. Figures! Michael growled, his fingers gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. What about Angela? Is she still in there? Yeah, they've got her in holding. But it's worse than that. Peterson's trying to make sure she doesn't walk out. At least, not with her reputation intact. He's already filed bogus charges, claiming she assaulted him during the arrest. And get this, they're trying to get her to sign a confession. Michael's stomach twisted with rage. Angela was the most law-abiding person he knew. She had a clean record, a steady job, a life built from sweat and sacrifice. And now, these bastards were trying to tear it all down. What about Jackson? Michael asked, his voice tight. No sign of him at the station. But I ran a trace on Peterson's phone. He made a call to a private number right after he brought Angela in. Cross-referenced it with known associates. And bingo, Peterson's little buddy, Carl Peterson Jr., has a cabin about 15 miles outside the city. Jackson might be there. Michael's hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. If he laid a hand on that boy. You'll make sure he pays, Carlos finished for him. I know, man, and I'll help you. But you gotta be smart about this. The second you go in guns blazing, you're a wanted man. That ship sailed a long time ago, Michael replied, his tone as cold as the mountain air he used to breathe. You still got eyes on the station's surveillance? Yeah. I've tapped into their system. Peterson's about to head out, probably going to check on your nephew. If you want to hit the place, now's your best shot." Michael allowed himself a small, bitter smile. "You keep eyes on him. If he leaves the city, I want to know. And keep tracking his calls." "You got it. And Mike, be careful. These guys don't play by the rules. I don't either," Michael said before cutting the line. He reached into the back seat of his truck and pulled out a heavy duffel bag. Inside were tools of his old trade, tactical gear, firearms, knives, and a tablet loaded with software. Carlos had cooked up specifically for operations like this. Michael changed quickly, his movements smooth and efficient, his mind already several steps ahead. He parked his truck 3 blocks away from the station, in a secluded alley lined with rusting dumpsters. From there, he continued on foot, his pace unhurried but purposeful. By the time he reached the station, he was nothing more than a shadow among shadows. Michael bypassed the main entrance, slipping instead toward the rear of the building where lesser-used entrances were often neglected. A security camera swiveled lazily in his direction, but Michael had anticipated that. Carlos's software fed a continuous loop of empty footage to the system, rendering him invisible. He reached a side door, the kind typically reserved for maintenance workers or deliveries. It was locked, of course, but a simple card reader posed little challenge. Michael slid a device from his bag, a sleek black rectangle no larger than a deck of cards. He pressed it against the reader, and within seconds, the door clicked open. The interior of the station was quiet, most of the officers either on patrol or dozing through the graveyard shift. Michael moved with the stealth of a predator, his boots barely making a sound on the polished linoleum floors. He'd memorized the layout Carlos had provided, every corridor and room etched into his mind. Angela was being held in the lower level, a dingy section of the station reserved for processing and temporary holding. Michael navigated the stairwell, his senses tuned to every creak and whisper of sound. As he descended, the air grew cooler, the scent of mildew mingling with the sharp tang of disinfectant. He encountered his first obstacle at the bottom of the stairs, a lone guard, seated at a desk, his attention glued to his phone. Michael crept closer, his movements fluid and controlled. The guard didn't even look up before Michael's arm wrapped around his throat, cutting off both air and consciousness with brutal efficiency. Michael lowered the unconscious guard to the floor and dragged him behind a storage cabinet. He stripped the man of his keycard and radio before continuing down the hallway. It wasn't long before he reached the holding area. Angela's cell was at the far end, her figure slumped on a metal bench, shoulders hunched in defeat. The sight of her, so broken and vulnerable, ignited something feral within him. "Angela," Michael whispered, his voice low but urgent. She looked up, her eyes wide and disbelieving. "Michael? What are you doing here?" "Getting you out," he replied, already swiping the guard's keycard against the electronic lock. The door swung open with a faint hiss, and Angela scrambled to her feet. They took Jackson. I don't know where, I know, and I'm going to get him back. But right now, we need to move." Angela nodded, her face pale but resolute. She followed Michael out of the cell, her steps clumsy with exhaustion. They navigated the corridors with the same caution. Michael had used to enter every corner and doorway, a potential ambush. When they reached the stairwell, Angela faltered. They said, I assaulted an officer, planted drugs in my car. They're trying to destroy me. They won't get the chance," Michael assured her. "I'll burn this whole place down before I let them touch you or Jackson again." They emerged from the building through the same maintenance door Michael had entered. The night air was crisp and cool, a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the station. Angela sucked in a deep breath, her fingers still trembling as they clung to Michael's arm. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice thin and wavering. "To my truck. From there, we find Jackson." Michael's voice was calm, but underneath the surface was a storm waiting to be unleashed. They slipped through the darkness like ghosts, leaving the station behind. But Michael's work wasn't finished. Not even close. Peterson had taken Angela's child. He'd violated every code of decency and honor Michael held sacred. And for that, there would be no forgiveness. Only retribution. Michael's truck tore down the highway like a missile, its engine snarling as he pushed it to its limits. Angela sat beside him, her fingers twisted together in her lap, eyes fixed on the road with the desperation he couldn't ignore. Her voice had gone hoarse from shouting at him to drive faster, but Michael didn't need the urging. The rage simmering within him was enough fuel. Carlos had called back 20 minutes earlier, his voice tight with urgency. "I've got a location." Peterson Jr.'s cabin is isolated as hell, out past the old quarry. No neighbors for miles. Just him, your nephew, and whatever sick games they're playing. The thought of Jackson alone, terrified, in the clutches of a man like Peterson's son, was enough to send Michael's mind spiraling into a place he rarely let himself go. The training, the years of discipline, all of it threatened to unravel with the fury burning through him. Angela had been babbling half-coherent pleas, alternately praying and cursing the entire drive. Michael tuned her out, not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't afford to let her terror infect him. He needed to stay cold, calculating. If he let his emotions loose, someone would die. And as much as he wanted that someone to be Peterson, Jackson's safety came first. "You sure he's there?" Angela rasped, her voice breaking on the last word. "Carlos doesn't make mistakes," Michael replied, his gaze locked on the empty stretch of road before them. "If Jackson's there, we'll find him. But what if?" "No." Michael cut her off sharply. "Don't go there. Don't let your mind wander into worst-case scenarios. He's alive, and we're getting him back." The certainty in his voice was both a promise and a warning. Angela fell silent, her fingers twitching restlessly against the worn fabric of the truck seat. The cabin couldn't be far now. The GPS Carlos had fed into his phone showed them closing in on the target. Michael took a sharp left onto a dirt road, the truck's tires skidding over gravel. The headlights pierced through the dense canopy of trees, revealing a narrow, twisting path that had seen better days. Overgrown branches scraped against the vehicle's sides like skeletal fingers, but Michael kept the accelerator pinned. "Stay in the truck," he ordered, as they neared the cabin's perimeter. "I mean it, Angela. I can't have you getting in the way." "The hell I will," Angela shot back, her voice strained but fierce. "That's my son in there, and I'll bring him out. But if you follow me in, you'll just be a liability. I need you to trust me." Angela's expression twisted with anguish, but she nodded, her shoulders sagging. "Just bring him back, Michael, please." Michael parked the truck about 100 yards from the cabin, its outline barely visible through the thick underbrush. He killed the engine and grabbed his bag from the back seat, slipping a handgun into his holster and a combat knife into his belt. It wasn't the ideal loadout, but stealth was more important than firepower for now. "Lock the doors and keep your head down," Michael said. "If anyone approaches the truck, you hit the gas and get the hell out of here. Understand?" Angela nodded, her eyes gleaming with tears she refused to shed. "Just bring him back." Michael slipped into the darkness, his movements silent and purposeful. The forest was a thick, tangled mass of trees and brush, the kind of place that could swallow a man whole. Perfect for concealment, perfect for an ambush. But Michael wasn't the one being hunted. He crept forward, his senses sharpened to a knife's edge. The cabin was a squat, ugly structure made of rotting wood and cheap siding, half hidden behind a wall of brambles. A dim light flickered through one of the windows, the only sign of life. Michael moved closer, his breath steady, his mind clear. He crouched behind a fallen log, eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. Peterson Jr. was reckless, cocky. Men like him always were. They thought their connections, their privilege, made them untouchable, but they'd never faced someone like Michael. He eased forward, slipping through the undergrowth like a shadow. The cabin's back door was ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. Sloppy, Peterson Jr. hadn't expected anyone to come looking for the boy. He'd assumed his father's authority was a shield, that no one would dare challenge it. Michael stepped inside, his feet making no sound on the creaky wooden floor. The air was thick with the stench of mold and something sour, something rotten. His fingers tightened around the grip of his knife as he moved deeper into the cabin. A muffled cry, faint but unmistakable. Michael's blood turned to ice. Jackson. He followed the sound, his muscles coiled like springs. The cabin's interior was a cluttered mess, filled with discarded beer cans and cigarette butts. Peterson Jr. lived like an animal, his squalor a reflection of the twisted mind that lurked beneath. Michael found Jackson in a back room, his small body tied to a chair with ropes that left angry red marks on his wrists. His eyes were wide and glazed, terror etched into every line of his face. Michael's heart lurched at the sight, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Jackson," he whispered, his voice as gentle as he could make it. "It's Uncle Mike. I'm here to get you out of here." The boy blinked, recognition cutting through the haze of fear. "Uncle Mike?" His voice was cracked, thin, but alive. "Yeah, kid. I got you." Michael moved swiftly, cutting through the ropes with his knife. The moment Jackson's hands were free, he threw his arms around Michael's neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "Shay, it's okay. You're safe now," Michael murmured, his own voice breaking under the weight of his relief. A noise, footsteps, heavy and unsteady. Peterson Jr. was home. Michael pulled Jackson behind him, his hand slipping to the gun at his side. The door creaked open, and there he was, a bulky, unshaven man with wild eyes and a smirk that made Michael's blood boil. "Well, well," Peterson Jr. sneered. "Looks like the kid's got himself a hero." Michael's finger tightened on the trigger. "Step away, now." Peterson laughed, a low, mocking sound. "Or what? You gonna shoot me? My daddy owns half this county. Whatever you do to me, it won't stick." "That's where you're wrong," Michael replied, his voice flat and cold. "You hurt my family, and there's not a force on this earth that's going to protect you now." Peterson's grin faltered, a flicker of doubt breaking through his arrogance. It was all Michael needed. The fight was brutal, quick, and merciless. When it was over, Peterson Jr. lay crumpled on the floor, his breath wheezing through broken ribs. Michael stood over him, his chest heaving, his eyes dark with fury. "Pray you never see me again," Michael whispered before scooping Jackson into his arms and carrying him out into the night. Michael drove through the night, his eyes locked on the road but his mind churning with calculations and contingencies. Jackson had fallen into an exhausted sleep in the back seat, curled up under a wool blanket. Angela had kept in the truck. Angela herself was silent, her hand resting protectively on her son's shoulder, as if afraid he might vanish if she loosened her grip. "Is he okay?" Michael asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "He's asleep, but, Michael, he's traumatized. They tied him up, left him alone in that filthy place." Angela's voice was brittle, teetering between fury and grief. "He's 12 years old. 12! And they treated him like animals," Michael finished, his own anger smoldering beneath the surface. "And they're going to pay for it. Every last one of them. What are we doing now?" Angela's voice was tight, controlled only by her sheer force of will. "We're getting to a safe place first. Once Jackson's secure, I'm going after Peterson. Not just him either. Whoever's protecting him. Whoever's giving him the power to pull stunts like this. I'm going to take them all down." Angela's expression twisted with a mixture of hope and dread. "You can't do this alone, Michael. These men, they're connected, influential. I don't care who they are." Michael's voice was a knife edge, honed and deadly. "They messed with the wrong family." He glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes lingering on Jackson's sleeping form. The boy had finally calmed down after Michael had brought him out of that hellhole of a cabin. Peterson Jr. had been left bloodied and whimpering on the floor, but Michael's restraint had been absolute. Killing him would have been too easy. What Michael needed was something far more lasting, something that would burn Peterson's entire network to the ground. Carlos had already sent him the files. Everything he needed to expose Peterson's operation. It wasn't just the corruption of one man, It was a network of dirty cops, politicians, and businessmen all feeding off the same trough. They'd been shielding each other for years, burying complaints, intimidating witnesses, fabricating evidence. The entire system was rotten, and Michael intended to tear it apart piece by piece. He pulled the truck into the parking lot of a cheap motel just outside city limits, the kind of place where no one asked questions and no one cared about the answers. Michael parked around the back, shielded from the view of the main road. He helped Angela and Jackson out of the truck, his movements quick and efficient. Angela held Jackson close. As they made their way to the room Michael had rented under a false name. The kid was still trembling, his eyes wide and hollow despite the exhaustion that clung to him like a shroud. Angela guided him to the bed and wrapped her arms around him, her body a protective shield. Michael set his bag down on the chipped wooden table and pulled out his laptop. He powered it on, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he accessed the files Carlos had sent. Names, dates, transactions, it was all there. Enough evidence to bury Peterson and everyone who'd protected him. Angela watched him from across the room, her eyes red and swollen. "What are you doing?" "Building a case." Michael's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Carlos sent me everything he could dig up. Bank statements, recorded conversations, internal memos. It's all here." "And then what?" Angela challenged. "You hand it over to the authorities, the same people who covered this up in the first place?" Michael's gaze snapped up, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "No, I'm making sure they can't cover it up this time. We're going public. Every last detail is going to hit the airwaves before they even know what's happening." Angela hesitated, her brow furrowing. "You're talking about what? Some kind of media blitz?" "Exactly. This isn't just about Peterson anymore. It's about everyone who gave him the power to do what he did. They think they're untouchable because they hide behind their badges and their money. But once this goes viral, their power means nothing." Angela nodded slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay here. Keep Jackson safe. I need to meet Carlos and get the last pieces of this puzzle. Once I have everything, we go live." Angela opened her mouth to argue, but Michael silenced her with a look. "You've been through enough. And so has Jackson. Let me handle this." The conviction in his voice left no room for argument. Angela lowered her head, her fingers absently brushing through Jackson's hair. "Just come back. Alive." Michael's expression softened, a rare moment of gentleness cutting through his hardened exterior. "I will. And when I do, this nightmare ends." He left the motel room with a final glance at Angela and Jackson, his chest tightening with the weight of what he was about to do. This wasn't just a mission, it was war, and he intended to win. Carlos was waiting for him at a dingy bar 2 towns over, his laptop open on a corner table surrounded by empty beer bottles. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression haggard. Whatever he'd dug up, it hadn't been easy. "You look like hell," Michael said as he slid into the booth. "Been up all night pulling this shit together," Carlos replied, his fingers tapping a frantic rhythm against the laptop's edge. "But it's all here, and it's bad, Mike. Real bad. Show me." Carlos turned the screen so Michael could see. The files were organized into neat folders, each one containing damning evidence against Peterson and his associates. Corruption, embezzlement, trafficking. The list went on and on. "They've been running this operation for years," Carlos explained. "Peterson's just the muscle. The real power's higher up. Politicians, corporate guys, even a judge or two, all of them lining their pockets and looking the other way." Michael's jaw clenched. "We need to get this out, everything, to everyone." Carlos nodded. "Already working on it. I've got contacts who can push this to every major news outlet, plus a few hacktivist groups who'd love to blow this thing wide open. Once it's out there, no one's going to be able to hide." Michael leaned back, his gaze cold and unyielding. "Good, because I'm not stopping until every last one of them is exposed." "And if they come after you?" Carlos asked, his eyes searching Michael's face. "Let them." Michael's smile was a razor's edge. I've spent my whole life fighting ghosts. Now I get to fight something real. Carlos cracked a grin, the tension easing from his shoulders. You always were a crazy son of a bitch. Maybe, but I'm the only one crazy enough to see this through. Michael's phone vibrated, a message flashing across the screen. Angela's name. He opened it, his eyes narrowing as he read the text. They know. Someone just tried to break into the room. We're not safe. Michael's blood ran cold. The war had just escalated, and he was ready. Michael read the message twice, his eyes narrowing as the words burned into his mind. They had found Angela and Jackson. Somehow, Peterson, or one of his cronies, had managed to track them to the motel. It shouldn't have been possible. Michael had taken every precaution, erased every digital footprint, but somehow they had found them. He pushed back his chair, his expression grim. Carlos looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed with concern. What's wrong? They found my sister and Jackson. Tried to break into their room. Michael's voice was clipped, his words sharpened by fury. Carlos swore under his breath. Damn! How the hell did they track you? I covered your trail, everything was clean. Doesn't matter now. They know where they are, which means Angela and Jackson are sitting ducks. Michael's fists clenched at his sides, his entire body wound tight with the need to act. Carlos's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up security feeds from the motel's network. I can tap into their cameras, see if anyone's hanging around outside. Do it, and send me a live feed. I need eyes on them the whole time I'm getting back there. Michael was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear as he dialed Angela's number. It rang twice before she answered, her voice trembling. Michael? Oh my God, I was so scared. Are you and Jackson okay? Michael cut her off, his tone harsh but laced with genuine concern. Yes. I locked the door and barricaded it with the dresser. Jackson's still sleeping, thank God. But someone tried to break in. I heard them fiddling with the lock, then banging on the door. Did they say anything? Make any threats? Michael demanded. No, just banging. Then it went quiet. I've been sitting here with a knife in my hand, praying they wouldn't try again. Michael's jaw tightened. The idea of Angela forced to defend herself and her child with nothing but a kitchen knife made his blood boil. Listen to me. Carlos is setting up a live feed from the motel's cameras. I'll be able to see if anyone's lurking around. But you need to stay put. Keep the door locked. And stay as quiet as possible. Okay. Angela's voice was barely a whisper. But Michael, what if they come back? They won't get the chance, Michael promised, his voice like steel. I'm on my way. He ended the call and turned to Carlos, who was already hacking into the motel's surveillance system. Within seconds, the laptop screen flickered to life, displaying grainy footage from various angles around the building. There, Carlos said, pointing to a figure pacing near the edge of the parking lot. See him? That's not some random guy. He's casing the place. Michael studied the man's movements, noting the way he lingered near the room Angela was hiding in. Even from a distance, Michael could tell the guy was armed. The bulge under his jacket was unmistakable. He's waiting for backup, Michael muttered. They're trying to flush her out. Then you'd better get moving, Carlos said. I'll keep eyes on him. If he makes a move, I'll call you. Michael nodded, already heading for the door. Send me the live feed. And Carlos, if he goes near that door, you let me know. Immediately. You got it, brother, Carlos replied, his fingers still dancing over the keys. Michael drove like a man possessed. The distance between the bar and the motel was short, but it felt like an eternity. His phone rested on the dashboard, displaying the live feed Carlos had sent. The man outside Angela's room was still there, pacing like a predator circling its prey. When Michael finally pulled into the motel's parking lot, he killed the engine and slid out of the truck without making a sound. The man was still pacing, his back turned to Michael as he mumbled something into a phone. Michael couldn't make out the words, but the body language was clear enough. He was frustrated, impatient. Whoever he was waiting for was taking too long. Michael crept forward, his steps silent on the cracked asphalt. He had no desire to make a scene, but if this man threatened Angela or Jackson, Michael wouldn't hesitate to end him permanently. He was within striking distance when the man's phone rang. The stranger lifted the device to his ear, his voice low but urgent. "Yeah? I'm still here. She hasn't left the room. What the hell's taking so long?" Michael moved before the man could react. His arm wrapped around the guy's neck, cutting off his air supply in a swift, brutal motion. The phone clattered to the ground as the man's hands clawed at Michael's arm, his eyes bulging with panic. Michael tightened his grip, his voice a cold whisper. "Who sent you?" The man's struggles only intensified, his face turning red as he gasped for air. Michael loosened his hold just enough to allow a ragged breath. "Peterson," the man croaked. He sent me to keep watch. That's all, man, I swear." Michael's expression didn't change. "Why?" They're trying to find you. Thought you'd come back here. Peterson's losing his mind. He wants you dead, man." "Where is he?" Michael demanded. "I don't know. He's been bouncing from place to place. But he's planning something. Something big. He's not letting this go." Michael's grip tightened again. "You tell him this. Tell him I'm coming for him. And when I find him, there won't be anywhere left for him to hide." The man's eyes widened with terror, but Michael released him, letting him collapse to the ground, gasping for air. Without another word, Michael turned and headed for the motel room, his senses alert for any other threats. Angela opened the door before he could knock, her eyes wild and frantic. "Michael, you're here." "Yeah, and we're leaving now." Michael stepped inside and grabbed Jackson, who was still groggy from being woken up so suddenly. "Pack whatever you have. We can't stay here." "Where are we going?" Angela asked, her voice shaking. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Peterson can't touch us." Michael's gaze burned with determination. "But first, I'm going to make sure he can't hurt anyone else, ever again." Angela hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "You're really going to do it, aren't you? Take them all down." Michael's expression was cold, ruthless. "I promised you, Angela, and I keep my promises." They gathered their things and slipped out of the motel, Michael's senses on high alert as they drove away. He knew Peterson wouldn't stop, not until he had what he wanted, but Michael was ready, and he was about to bring the fight to them. Michael drove through the night, his eyes never leaving the road as the truck rumbled along the back highways and dirt roads that twisted like veins across the Texas landscape. Angela sat beside him, her shoulders hunched forward, hands clutched together so tightly her knuckles were white. Jackson lay curled up in the back seat, exhaustion finally overtaking the terror that had kept him awake for the last 48 hours. They'd switched vehicles twice since leaving the motel, Michael ensuring they couldn't be traced. The old truck he'd stolen from a farm outside the city was anonymous, beaten down, and nondescript. Just another piece of rusted machinery in a world full of neglect. But Michael knew better than to underestimate the reach of Peterson's network. No one was safe until he'd burned their entire operation to the ground. "We can't keep running," Angela said, her voice breaking the silence. It was thick with fear, but there was something else beneath it. Determination. "Michael, we need to do something. We can't just hide forever." "I'm not planning to hide," Michael replied, his tone clipped and precise. "I just needed to get you and Jackson somewhere safe before I made my move." "What move?" Angela asked, her eyes narrowing. "You've been so focused on getting us away from Peterson, but you haven't told me what you're actually going to do." Michael glanced at her, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "I'm going to expose them. All of them. Peterson, his father, and every damn official they've paid off to keep this operation running. It's not just about what they did to you and Jackson. They've been terrorizing people for years. It ends now." Angela's lips pressed into a thin line, her expression torn between hope and dread. "And how exactly do you plan to do that? These people, they have resources, connections. They've been getting away with this for years." "Not anymore." Michael's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Carlos pulled everything he could find. Financial records, phone logs, surveillance footage. Enough evidence to bring down Peterson and his entire network. All we have to do is release it. Release it. To who? The police? They're part of the problem, Michael. You know that. I'm not giving it to the police, Michael said. I'm giving it to everyone. Every news outlet, every activist group, every social media platform that will listen. Once it's out there, it can't be buried. They can't hide behind their power anymore. Angela stared at him, her eyes widening. You're really doing this, aren't you? You're going to blow the whole thing open. That's the plan. Michael's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. A fury so cold it could freeze hell itself. And I'm not stopping until every one of them pays for what they've done. Angela's shoulders slumped, her breath coming out in a shaky sigh. I don't know if this will work, Michael. These people, they always find a way to slip through the cracks. Not this time, Michael replied. Not with the kind of evidence we have. Carlos has already set everything up. Once I press the button, it's all going live. Angela shook her head slowly, her gaze dropping to her hands. What about Jackson? What about us? Even if you take them down, they'll come after us. People like Peterson, they never stop. Michael's jaw tightened. You'll be safe. I've already made arrangements. Carlos is setting up a new identity for you and Jackson. New names, new lives. Somewhere far away from here. Angela's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. You think I want to run? After everything they did to us? After everything they did to Jackson? No, Michael. I'm not hiding. Not anymore. This isn't about hiding, Michael shot back. It's about survival. If you stay here, Peterson's people will find you, and they won't stop until you're dead or silenced. I can't let that happen. Angela's expression crumpled, her shoulders shaking as she fought back tears. And what about you? What happens to you once this goes public? That's not your concern, Michael said, his voice harsh. Your only priority right now is Jackson, Angela laughed, the sound bitter and broken. Of course, because you've already decided that your life doesn't matter, haven't you? That it's okay if you burn yourself alive to protect us. I'm doing what needs to be done. Michael's gaze was unwavering, his resolve ironclad. And you're going to do what I tell you, because it's the only way I can keep you safe. Angela shook her head, her eyes glistening with tears. You don't get to decide that, Michael. You don't get to make that choice for me. Michael didn't respond. He couldn't. The truth was, he didn't have an answer for her. All he knew was that his mind was set, his course plotted. Nothing would stop him from destroying Peterson's network, not even Angela's pleas. They drove for another hour in silence. The only sound the low rumble of the truck's engine. The landscape outside was barren and unforgiving, a stretch of desert and scrubland that seemed to go on forever. Michael had chosen the location for its isolation, its distance from anything that could be traced back to them. When they finally arrived, the cabin loomed ahead like a dark sentinel against the starless sky. It was a relic from another life, a place Michael had used during his time off grid. No electricity, no running water, just four walls and a roof, but it was safe, and that was all that mattered. He parked the truck and led Angela and Jackson inside. The air was stale, thick with the scent of old wood and dust. Jackson clung to Angela's side, his eyes darting around the unfamiliar space with apprehension. It's not much, but it'll keep us hidden for now, Michael said, his voice rough. I'll be heading back out soon. Carlos is waiting for me. Angela reached out and grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't do this, Michael. Please. We can find another way. There is no other way, Michael replied, his eyes hard. You and Jackson stay here. I'll handle the rest. He pulled free from her grasp and stepped back into the night. Angela's voice called after him, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. His phone buzzed in his pocket as he walked away, Carlos's number flashing on the screen. Michael, you ready? Carlos's voice crackled through the line. Yeah. Send me everything. It's time to end this. Michael's hands trembled with adrenaline As he disconnected the call, the decision had been made. Everything Carlos had gathered, the bank statements, surveillance footage, damning conversations would be released to the public within the hour. No more waiting, no more running. The truth would be out there, irreversible, untouchable. He shoved his phone into his pocket and climbed into the old truck, its engine coughing to life with a growl. The cabin was several miles behind him now. Angela and Jackson left with nothing but instructions and a promise. Michael wasn't sure he could keep, but if he failed, at least they'd be far enough away from the bloodbath he was about to trigger. Carlos had given him a location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. That's where Peterson had set up his makeshift headquarters, a place outside official jurisdiction where his thugs could operate freely. It was where they planned to launch their last-ditch effort to eliminate Michael before his evidence went public. Peterson had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated the lengths Michael was willing to go to protect his family. The drive was a blur, Michael's mind working through scenarios, tactics, backup plans. He had no illusions about what was waiting for him. Peterson wouldn't leave things to chance. There would be guards, possibly more of those hired guns, like the one who had nearly broken into the motel room. But Michael wasn't concerned. His own rage had become something of a weapon, honed to a brutal edge by desperation and fury. As the warehouse came into view, a hulking structure of rusted metal and broken windows, Michael slowed the truck and cut the engine. The night was thick and oppressive, clouds smothering the moonlight until everything was painted in shades of black and gray, perfect for a stealth approach. He crept forward, his senses sharp and alert. The perimeter was guarded, just as he expected. 2 men patrolled the entrance, their movements casual but deliberate. They weren't cops. Hired muscle? Probably ex-military or mercenaries willing to break the law for the right price. Peterson had spared no expense. Michael pulled his knife from its sheath, the cool metal comforting against his palm. The first man didn't even hear him coming. A swift strike to the throat, cutting off air and sound. The body crumpled to the ground with only the soft rustle of fabric. The second man caught the faintest glimpse of Michael's shadow before the knife sliced across his neck, a clean, efficient motion that left him choking on his own blood. Michael stepped over the bodies, his expression devoid of remorse. This was war, and he intended to win. The warehouse door creaked as he pushed it open, slipping inside like a ghost. The interior was a maze of rusted machinery and forgotten equipment, shadows pooling in every corner. Michael moved through the darkness with the precision of a predator, his senses tuned to every sound, every movement. It didn't take long to find them. Peterson had set up his command post near the center of the building, makeshift tables covered in maps, laptops, and firearms. A half-dozen men were gathered, their voices low and urgent as they discussed their next move. And there, standing at the center of it all, was Carl Peterson, the elder, the man who had orchestrated every sick, twisted attempt to destroy Michael's family. His hair was graying, his face lined with the arrogance of power, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. A man who had spent his life manipulating others to get what he wanted. Michael felt his anger coalesce into something cold and lethal. "Do we have confirmation on their location?" Peterson was asking one of his men, his voice thick with impatience. "No, sir, but the tracker we placed on the truck shows it's still on the move, heading west." Peterson slammed his fist down on the table. "Then find them. I don't care how many men you have to send. That boy is leverage. If we lose him, we lose everything." Michael stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You've already lost." Every head snapped toward him, eyes widening with shock and fear. Michael saw hands reaching for guns, bodies shifting into defensive stances. But none of it mattered. His focus was on Peterson, and Peterson alone. "Carter," Peterson spat, his eyes narrowing. "I should have known you'd come here, like a damn moth to a flame." Michael's smile was humorless. "You wanted me here. Now you've got me." Peterson's men moved to encircle him, their weapons raised and ready. Michael's gaze flicked between them, his mind already calculating angles and weaknesses. But Peterson held up a hand, his expression twisted with something resembling amusement. "Hold your fire. Let's see what our friend here has to say. After all, he came all this way." Peterson's smirk was sickening. "I assume you're here to bargain? To beg for your sister and her little boy? Bargain?" Michael's voice was ice. "No, I'm here to end you." Peterson laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "You really think you can take me down? I own this city. I own the people who run it. You're nothing but a rogue soldier playing at being a hero." "You think your money makes you untouchable," Michael replied. "But you made one mistake. You tried to hurt my family. And for that, I'm going to dismantle everything you've built." Peterson's eyes flickered with doubt, the first crack in his carefully constructed facade. "And how do you plan to do that? You're alone, outnumbered, surrounded by men who would gladly put a bullet in your skull." Michael shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Because while you were busy sending your thugs after me, I was busy making sure the world knows exactly what you are." Peterson's smile faltered. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Carlos sent everything," Michael said. "Every dirty secret, every bribe, every record of your abuses of power. It's all out there now, uploaded to every news network, every social media platform. Even if you kill me, it's too late." The room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of Michael's words settling like ash. One of Peterson's men glanced nervously at his phone, his expression turning pale. "Sir, he's telling the truth. It's everywhere. The whole damn city is talking about it." Peterson's expression twisted into something hideous, his arrogance crumbling beneath the crushing weight of reality. "You son of a bitch! You think this is over? You think you've won?" Michael took a step forward, his gaze locked on Peterson. "This isn't about winning. It's about justice. And you? You're done." Michael's words hung in the air, heavy with finality. And then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted, a sudden explosion of sound that tore through the silence like a knife. Michael's instincts kicked in, his body reacting before his mind could process the chaos. He dropped to the floor, his hands moving with brutal efficiency as he rolled behind a stack of rusted metal crates. Bullets sliced through the air, splintering wood and ricocheting off steel with a fury that echoed through the warehouse. "Take him down!" Peterson bellowed, his voice laced with panic. The men around him scrambled to obey, their weapons barking, as they unleashed a hail of bullets in Michael's direction. Michael stayed low, his body pressed against the cold concrete as he assessed his surroundings. They had him outnumbered, but not outmatched. Peterson's men were thugs, hired muscle who relied on brute force and intimidation. Michael had spent years mastering the art of war. Precision, stealth, discipline, these were his weapons. He drew his handgun and fired off 2 quick shots, dropping the nearest gunman with surgical precision. Another advanced, his face twisted with rage, but Michael took him down with a single shot to the knee, followed by a vicious strike to the temple. It was messy work, loud, brutal, but effective. Michael moved through the warehouse like a ghost, his footsteps silent, his presence a shadow flitting between the tangled remains of forgotten machinery. His senses were razor-sharp, his training guiding his movements as he dismantled Peterson's forces one by one. A flash of movement to his left. Michael ducked, the bullet whizzing past his ear with a hiss. He fired twice, and another body crumpled to the ground. The room stank of sweat and fear, the metallic tang of blood thick in the air. Peterson's voice rose above the chaos, shrill and desperate. "What the hell are you idiots doing? Kill him! Kill him now!" Michael couldn't help but smile, a grim satisfaction curling his lips. The arrogance was gone, stripped away by fear. Peterson had lost control of the situation, and he knew it. "Peterson!" Michael shouted, his voice echoing through the warehouse. "You wanted me? Well, here I am." Another round of gunfire answered him, but Michael had already moved, slipping between shadows as he circled his prey. Peterson was retreating, his men falling back as their numbers dwindled. Michael's attack was relentless, his precision devastating. Within minutes, the warehouse had been transformed into a battlefield littered with the bodies of Peterson's soldiers. Some groaned and writhed where they'd fallen. Others lay still and silent. The few who remained standing were visibly shaken, their weapons trembling in their hands. Peterson was running. Michael caught sight of him darting toward a door at the far end of the building, his bulky frame struggling to move with the speed of desperation. Michael pursued, his movements swift and merciless. He burst through the door just as Peterson was fumbling with a set of keys, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't fit them into the lock. Michael aimed his gun at the man's chest, his expression a mask of cold fury. "It's over, Peterson," Michael growled. "You have nowhere left to run." Peterson's eyes were wild, darting between Michael's face and the gun pointed at his heart. His arrogance had melted away, replaced by naked terror. You can't do this. I have connections, friends, powerful people who will come after you. They can try." Michael's voice was steady, his grip on the gun unwavering. "But your empire is crumbling. Your men are either dead or running scared. The evidence is out there. Everything you've built is burning to the ground." Peterson's lip curled in a snarl. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing but a thug. A broken soldier playing at justice." Michael took a step forward, his gaze locked on Peterson's. "Maybe, but I kept my promise. You hurt my family. And now, I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone else again." Peterson's bravado cracked, his shoulders sagging as the weight of defeat settled over him. "What are you going to do? Kill me?" Michael's finger tightened on the trigger, the temptation burning through him like fire. Everything Peterson had done, every life ruined, every family torn apart, it all hung between them, demanding retribution. But Michael didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he lowered the gun, his expression hardening. "No, killing you would be too easy, too merciful. You're going to face justice, real justice. And this time, there's no one left to protect you." Before Peterson could react, the sound of sirens pierced the night, their wails growing louder with every passing second. Michael had called them, the real authorities, the ones who weren't bought and paid for by Peterson's dirty money. Peterson's face crumpled, his eyes widening with panic. No, you can't do this. They'll tear me apart. Everything I've worked for." "Exactly." Michael's smile was grim. "And I'll be there to watch." The door behind him burst open, armed agents flooding the room with weapons drawn. Peterson collapsed to his knees, his hands rising in surrender. As the realization of his defeat settled in, Michael stepped back, his body relaxing for the first time since the nightmare had begun. He watched as Peterson was handcuffed, his blustering threats devolving into desperate pleas for mercy. None of the agents seemed inclined to listen. It was over, finally over. Michael walked away from the warehouse, his body aching from the strain of battle, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. The evidence Carlos had released was already making headlines, the story spreading like wildfire through every network and platform. Peterson's empire was collapsing, his allies scrambling to cover their own tracks. But Michael didn't care about them. His fight was over. When he returned to the cabin, Angela was waiting for him on the porch, her eyes red from lack of sleep and worry. Jackson stood beside her, clutching his mother's hand, but looking stronger than Michael had expected. The kid had his mother's resilience. "It's done," Michael said, his voice rough but steady. "Peterson's finished, and everyone who helped him is going down with him." Angela's breath shuddered from her chest, relief washing over her like a tidal wave. "And you?" Michael hesitated. "I can't stay. Not for long. There are still people out there who'll want revenge. But you and Jackson are safe now. That's all that matters." Angela stepped forward, her arms wrapping around him in a fierce embrace. "You saved us. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't have to." Michael hugged her back, his voice a broken whisper. "Just live your life. Be happy. That's enough." They parted with tears in their eyes, but a sense of peace neither of them had felt in years. Michael turned away, his steps heavy but his resolve unshaken. As he disappeared into the darkness, Angela and Jackson stood together, their arms wrapped around each other. They were free, finally free. And for Michael, that was enough. The story of Michael, Angela, and Jackson is a powerful testament to resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of family. It teaches us that true strength is not just in muscle or power, but in unwavering determination to protect those we love and to seek justice even when the odds are overwhelmingly stacked against us. Michael's journey reminds us that integrity matters, that standing up against corruption and cruelty is not just a choice, it's a duty. For Angela, her fierce love for her son propelled her to confront unimaginable dangers. And in Jackson, we see the quiet strength of youth learning to trust and rebuild after trauma. For older audiences, this story resonates deeply. It speaks to the protective instincts we hold for our children and grandchildren, the courage required to stand firm against injustice, and the wisdom to fight for a better future, even when it seems out of reach. As we age, we gain perspective on what truly matters: family, honor, and a legacy of integrity. If this story moved you, if it inspired you to believe in the power of truth and the importance of protecting the innocent, then join us. Like, share, and subscribe to support more powerful emotional storytelling that speaks to your experiences, your values, and your dreams. Together, we can shine a light on stories of resilience and justice, stories that matter.